Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What with Dan and Julie. Today we have Dillon on, who is a biologist. Hi Dillon, how are you?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing good.
Good. So do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you actually do, Dillon?
Right. So, like you introduced, I'm a biologist. But I guess if we break myself down into different sub-discipline, I'm an evolutionary biologist who studies reptiles and amphibians. So herpetofauna is the scientific name for them. And yeah, basically what I focus on a lot is more or less Middle American species. So that is from Mexico to Panama. And I guess the questions I've asked of them have varied from looking at how mud turtles are distributed in a river system all the way to my current research that uses the evolutionary history of about 1,200 species of reptiles and amphibians to create regions throughout Middle America.
Wow. So were you always interested in biology and animals and how they evolved?
Yes, but it's been a very interesting, I guess it's a bit of an interesting history with me because up until I was about 13, I used to be absolutely terrified of everything to do with nature. To a major fault. Like I couldn't go swimming in lakes because I had watched a program on Animal Planet saying that bull sharks could swim up from the Gulf of Mexico and gnaw my leg off. And, I was a very interested but gullible, maybe not gullible, but overcautious child. And then, eventually, I guess to add insult to injury, my family owned a pet store, so I grew up with animals. And I was terrified of it until I was, about 13. And then things kind of switched for me. And I really don't know what caused the switch, but I did a very deep dive and have been, loving animals since.
I was going to say, that's a very interesting move from not liking animals to going to reptiles, which is, even for me, an animal lover, I'm terrified of snakes. And,
right, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a mad flip.
Yeah. I always like to say that it was my desire to know a lot about them that caused my fear, because I always knew, those crazy facts of a tiger can win a tug of war against 20 men, or this snake bite can kill you in 15 minutes. So that's what I latched onto instead of all this other cool stuff with them.
So what happened to you after the age of 13? What was sort of school like for you, and then going into university?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I started to, around that age is when I started to actually work in that family pet store. So I think that might have been what happened, is actually getting to work with the animals and kind of seeing that, they're not here to just, bite you at any time.
Side question, is it one of those, a family pet store in my eyes is one of the ones that has all the exotic animals in, not just your guinea pigs, and so you had a bit of everything going in that pet store, yeah?
Yeah, we had a bit of everything. I guess to complete the full picture, it's tied to my grandfather's parent company, who makes custom aquariums. So we would have, it was very interesting growing up, because 200-gallon aquariums were kind of like my 10-gallon, I guess, would be the way. I always could play around with these massive enclosures. But yeah, it was a family-run pet store with a lot of exotics. I managed the reptile and amphibian section, and I think at the peak we would have over 200 animals in stock at any time, of just lizards, snakes, frogs, you name it. But yeah, the education side of that, I did high school, or grades, whatever that is, 9 to 12. I ultimately dropped out my junior year so that I could work more, and essentially did homeschooling to, get my degree and all that fun stuff. But yeah, then after that, I went to university at Texas A&M University in Texas. Yeah.
And how did you find it at school? Did you tailor it towards maybe going into biology?
I wish I could say that's why I did it. I totally followed my high school girlfriend.
Well, at least you're honest.
yeah. But it was actually, I guess, the best thing I could have done, because that school offered so many opportunities for me, and I ultimately got a degree in wildlife and fishery sciences.
Oh wow, that's the title.
Yeah.
And what sort of things did you study at university?
Right. So it was always, cater towards reptiles and amphibians. So in terms of like the classes I took, you take herpetology, which was just the study of them, and you go out looking for frogs and snakes on the weekends, and come back for the lectures and learn about the phylogenetic relationships or the ecology of crocodiles one week, or whatever. But ultimately, all the classes that I took were really focused on learning how to do research in the field, whether that be, it's going out and collecting the data, or it's analyzing the data and using models to make big inferences about what's going on in a system. So it was pretty diverse, but I think a lot of what I did in my undergrad, where I learned how to do field biology, was really going out and getting involved in doing research.
So you're in your master's now. You've gone back to do your master's.
Right.
And what are you specializing in now?
Right. So I guess throughout my whole undergraduate career, I was focused on ecology research. So just kind of going out and I guess ecology research is what you think of when you think of a field biologist. They're going out and learning how species are distributed, or where the boundaries for one species are, something like that. But now what I focus on, I'm like you mentioned, I'm in my master's program at San Diego State University in California. And what I'm focusing now is evolutionary biology. So that is, instead of looking at, I guess ecology is sort of I always like to say it's like the cover of the book. It's what you see now, but evolution is the whole story leading up to that moment in time. So that's ultimately what I'm looking at now. More evolutionary theory instead of ecology.
I have to say, I'm fascinated by evolution. It blows my mind when you watch wildlife documentaries and you see the sheer variety and the specialization of animals across the wildlife kingdoms. It is amazing what's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that exact variety that I really like to focus on, and I really want to understand what factors cause that variety that we see today.
I mean, we've all studied at school, right? In biology, and to a much lesser extent than you have. But it blew my mind that it was just a mutation that happened in one or two creatures, that then they were better and they could make more, and that's how evolution happens. And you studying it in depth, what kind of things are you sort of looking for?
And also, what blows you away when you look and find some of these things?
Oh man, those are both really good questions. So, ultimately, no matter how deep into the theory you go and how many textbooks you read, evolution is almost always influenced by four main factors, and that's mutation. It's still early morning. Mutation, gene flow, drift, which is just kind of like random elements, and selection. So I think everyone kind of knows mutation and understands selection. But the gene flow and drift stuff is extremely fascinating. It's just, how do species interact with each other, and what random events can cause, increased diversity.
So what is gene flow? Sorry, I'm interested in that. What is that?
Right. So I mean, the classical example of gene flow would be you have two populations, and gene flow is the measure of connectivity between them. So how many individuals from either population are sort of, intermingling with the other population and breeding and creating offspring, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the very basic definition of gene flow.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah. So you obviously spoke a lot about you being out in the field. So what's sort of like the average day for you being out in the field, obviously observing and finding some of these creatures?
Right. So a lot of my field work was focused in Belize. And I guess an average day there was waking up very, very early. There was multiple projects going on, so it was always a balancing act of what to do. Most of the time we would go out early and we'd go either track turtles. So we have this big radio antenna, and we have turtles throughout the whole property that have little radio tags on them. And it's sort of like a metal detector for turtles. You kind of point it and it makes a louder beep if you get closer to it. So yeah, we usually try to find all 10 to 12 turtles twice a week. So a lot of our time was focused on that, but it would also be going out doing transect surveys where we just walk around and try to find stuff. There really isn't a typical day. It's more or less you go out and you do research, you come back for breakfast, you go out again, you do research, have lunch, then it's too hot, so you do nothing for for most of the day. You either just go swimming, or you sit in a hammock, or you try to do some computer work or something. And then at nighttime, you're usually going out again to do a night transect, or you're going out to mist net for bats, or there's always something going on.
Wow, sounds awesome. It sounds like a job I'd like.
Just want to jump in there quickly. What you obviously spoke about doing some computer work. What sort of stuff is it you're logging, and is that something you enjoy, part of this career?
Yeah, it's very interesting because the computer side of things, there's a saying, it's for every hour in the field, you're going to have 3 hours in front of a computer. Because you're either writing something up, like you're writing up a publication, or you're writing up a grant or something like that, or you are doing the actual analysis, which takes up a lot of time. And I definitely enjoy it. It's actually very it's really influenced my current work, because my current work, and this was very strategic, and I love and hate it, has no field work. It's entirely computer based. And that was strategic because I want to apply, I had, like I mentioned, nothing but ecology background, but I wanted to ask evolutionary questions. So instead of doing a field ecology research with an evolutionary spin, I instead decided to dive very, very deep into evolutionary theory and methods, which require a lot of computer work to really do. So hopefully I can apply that to more field-based projects in the future.
That's really interesting, because we had a zoologist on a few weeks ago, and she was talking very similarly about analytics and that side of what she does. And she said it was not a shock, but she didn't realize how much of that would go into it, and that she now uses that to inform, conservation projects, which is very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because we live in this age of, massive data sets. You can get, for example, one occurrence data set that I use that just tells us where species are found, whether it's by community scientists, people just out there taking pictures, or through museums or other studies. One of the data sets that I downloaded had 2.1 million rows, so 2.1 million occurrence records. God. Right. And the challenge is, how do you use that much data?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So just to backtrack a little bit off one of Jules's questions, what's something that's really sort of blown your mind in evolutionary biology? Something that you've looked at and gone, oh my God, how has that happened?
Right. So it's always, I guess the best example for me, because it's the one that I always go back to, it's the stories that evolution tells. And my favorite example is that with bolete-glossid salamanders. So bolete-glossa is a genus of salamanders through Central and South America. Mm-hmm. And they're just absolutely incredible. So one, they're lungless, so they don't have any lungs. They just respire through their skin. Wow. Which is already just cool as it is. And they have this like extreme, it's a hyobranchial apparatus, and it basically allows them to like projectile shoot their tongue, kind of like not in the same way a chameleon does, but in that same vein of like they're shooting out their tongue pretty far. But in terms of the story they tell, I believe they were on the west coast side of North America, but I could be wrong about that. But anyways, they started expanding the range southwards, and they got into Central America, where it was warmer and it was a little bit more, it was more humid. So the humidity let them really explore the area without fear of drying out, because they're amphibians, so it's very easy for them to dry out. But that heat is what did something absolutely incredible. They started to develop faster when they were young. So reptiles and amphibians, they take in heat from their outside surroundings, and if you give them more heat, it's kind of like if you jump-started our metabolism. So they started growing a little bit quicker, and ultimately they would become adults, whatever constitutes adult, earlier. And their feet, that's the incredible part. So when most animals develop, their feet they're originally webbed. There's still webbing between fingers, and occasionally even humans are born with webbed hands or feet. But the salamanders, they never really formed their digits. They never really formed toes and fingers because they hadn't developed long enough. So they have these kind of like blobby, webby looking feet. And because of that, normally that would be a bad thing, like you're coming out not fully formed. But in this case, it actually acted as suction cups. So they're kind of like, it's kind of like a Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible scaling a building with these like, underdeveloped feet, allowing them to climb up trees. And ultimately they exploited a niche that hadn't been found, allowing them to very, very rapidly speciate throughout Central and South America. And have, I think it's 130 some odd species now. They're the largest genus of salamanders.
I love
today,
stuff like that. That's so cool. That's so cool.
Right. So yeah, it's stories like that got me into, evolution.
And being an evolutionary biologist, do you have to look a bit back towards the past to see how some of these things have happened? Do you have to look at fossils at all, or is that too far back for you?
Normally you would use fossils. A lot of the times reptiles and amphibians don't really fossilize well. That's partially because of where they're at. Humid environments kind of break it down a bit faster, but also amphibians just don't fossilize very well. But we do use fossils whenever we're creating phylogenetic trees, so looking at how species are related to one another. You can use a fossil as sort of this point in the data set that says, okay, at time 50 million years ago, we knew this species was here, or this ancestral species was here. So it allows you to inform, I guess, when species became species or when groups became groups.
I was actually watching a documentary on the TV the other day, and it was talking about the evolution of mankind. And at one point on Earth, there was something like 4 or 5 different species of human walking around at the same time. That kind of blows my mind. Do you ever look into other things outside of your area of interest?
Yeah, all the time. It's always something different that I'm looking at. I was kind of looking at some population genetic studies of birds recently, just because it looked very interesting. Or, there was something big that was looking at the worldwide insect distribution or something of that nature, but I can't actually remember what they were actually analyzing.
So what would be a personality trait or personality traits that you see in yourself and others in the career and field around you that you think help make you thrive?
Yeah, that's a good one. So normally what I say is, especially if you're wanting to do field biology and going out to places and doing stuff, you need to be extraordinarily flexible in living arrangements, day-to-day activities, because I've lived in some like really rough conditions. I've hammock slept before just because there was no beds available. I think a few times I've slept on the floor just to have space. And it's also it's hard to say, oh, I'm going to not pay you're going to pay your rent, but you're going to not pay rent for 6 months and go and live somewhere else, completely a different country in this weird field station that doesn't have Wi-Fi signal. So it requires a lot of flexibility to kind of, leave that comfort of having a 9-to-5 job or just being a student. But having that flexibility really allows you to do some incredible things. It allows you to travel the world for cheap and or free, and get to see some amazing things. So it's 100% worth it. You just have to, be willing to kind of give up a lot, I think.
What are some of the biggest positives or opportunities you either had or you can see having in the future from the industry?
Right. So, I mean, if I just go chronologically, my first spring break as a university student, I went to Panama for 10 days to help a professor collect parasites from.
That's not the average spring break, is it?
Right. No. It's not beaches in Cancun. It's it's this random place in the middle of the jungle. But I got to go basically as long as I paid for my flight, everything else was covered. So it's very cheap to go and do it that way.
How did you find an opportunity like that?
So that one, I walked up my very first semester when I was there. I knew I wanted to get involved, knew I wanted to do research. And I basically went to the A&M Zoological Society meeting. I walked up to their advisor and said, "Hi, my name is Dillon. I'm really interested in getting involved in research." At the time, I was very, very, very lucky that the person whom I asked was actually the director of undergraduate research at the time as well. So it was like a perfect, mix. And he pointed me towards someone I started working for. And then, I guess 6 months later or so, he invited me on a trip to go down to Panama. But I don't know. I think that just saying very directly that you want to get involved and just asking someone instead of waiting for the right opportunity to ask, definitely just opens up so many doors.
Yeah, you got to go out there and get it, basically.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And any other opportunities you've had so far?
Yeah. So in terms of, so the study abroad stuff was always fantastic. There's also almost every university in the country or anywhere really has funding opportunities. However, they're usually very difficult to find, which is both good and bad. If you do find it, that means there's not that much competition. There was one I applied for that basically they would give you $1,000 to do research as an undergraduate and then $4,000 to do an internship if you're choosing. And that one, basically, it was if you applied, you got it because there just wasn't competition. So for that one, it allowed me to do an undergraduate research project, which we're actually should be getting published somewhat soon, and then do an internship where I got to stay at a research station for about 3 months over the summer.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what would be some of the less favorable aspects that you've had to deal with, apart from the sleeping in hammocks?
Yeah, it's you do get a different threshold for what is gross and what is what sucks, I guess. So I mean, I've had parasites quite a few times now, both intestinal as well as bot flies, the ones that lay like larvae inside of your skin, and they.
Oh my word.
Yeah, I had 2 of them last field thing. I actually got them through customs, and I named them. That's because we got them out. But yeah, they're named Tick and Tack because they're little white parasite things. So it's, you get that, you get very used to having to do, very long hikes with very little food, but then you get back and you eat like 3,000 calories in a single sitting. So it's a lot of hard, very manual labor a lot of the time, but it's so worth it. Like you don't even really think about it until you look back and you're like, oh, I guess that did kind of suck, but yeah, you have a very different tolerance for the suck, I guess. What is terrible, what is awful.
I guess with your biology degree, you can go into numerous different fields and certain areas, but we like to ask a few questions just around sort of salary expectations in the industries, and doing a bit of research into biology and where the degree can take you. For example, a research position, you're looking at between 20,000 to about £30,000. So I don't know what that's around, I guess, 40 in America. So does that sort of sit right with you? Do those figures sound right for somebody with that kind of degree?
Yeah, absolutely. Biology degrees are one, they don't pay an enormous amount by any means. And oftentimes that it's tricky because that number is not always what you get in your bank account, I guess. It's because sometimes that number is also factoring in the fact that they're housing you and they're feeding you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I've known people who do it and they're not paying rent, they're not paying for food.
Yeah, food and boredom. Yeah.
Right, but they get maybe $150 a week. Just money. So I always say it's not a field that you get into for the money, but the experiences it gives you are just bar none. They are absolutely incredible.
Absolutely.
And if you do pursue it long term, you'll eventually end up in a government job, a consulting job, or as an academic, and those typically pay quite a bit better.
I was going to say, I'd imagine the dream sort of situation for somebody with your kind of degree would be to be a consultant on one of the big, animal documentaries or something of that nature. Right.
That would be what I'd love to do. Gosh, yeah, because I love creating content almost as much as I love studying the animals. So it's
your Instagram's wicked. We'll be sure to tag that when we put this up. But it's great if you're into animals or reptiles. Check it out.
Yeah, it's that would be a perfect thing. Ultimately, the path I'm on is going towards academia, becoming a professor. So it's still, after this degree, it's still another 5-6 years of school, and then hopefully teaching and whatnot.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, but I'm always, I'm also very flexible to let's go to a different opportunity. Who knows?
So what would be something that's not in the job description that you have to deal with? Obviously, you've already spoken about the ticks and parasites and things. Anything else?
Yeah, there's a in most yeah, I would say most studies. There's an element of cooperating with the public that isn't really advertised. I mean, so I have a colleague, for example, she studies hummingbirds, so she needs to go out and catch them and, you know, get samples from them. So she has been absolutely struggling with either contacting private residents to trap hummingbirds in their backyard, or with talking with local government. So anyone who runs the park services, or I was actually helping her trap in a botanical garden very recently. So it's operating with all these different people and trying to make all these different connections to actually get things done. You know, there's so much required emailing and calling and working with so many different groups just for a single project.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that isn't really stressed. I think that when you go into biology, you think, oh, I'm going to go out, I'm going to look for animals, maybe take some photos and then analyze and research it. But there's so much that goes into doing all of that.
That's going back to the conversation we had with our zoologist. She actually said a very similar thing, and she said that her following on social media has actually helped in that department, because, you know, charities or people or reserves will see the following and be a bit more open to talking and helping do stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then anywhere that I've worked with before, I always love to make content for them. It's sort of, I guess, for us type of deal.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone loves to see that, you know, hey, such and such at this garden was trapping animals or whatever. Here's some video. Here's what they were doing. Like, it's just a win-win for everyone.
And how does somebody begin to progress within the field of biology? You know, you've done your social media content, but how are you looking to progress professionally?
Right. So in terms of professionally, I've been really kind of, I guess, taking a step back and looking at the research that I want to do. And I mean, for me, my research, I need to have, I guess, just a couple key tenets, is that it has to be very fun for me to do. I have to love doing it every day, or maybe not every day, but I have to love what I'm doing. I have to love what I'm researching, or else it's going to be difficult to finish it. But also I want to do research that has a larger impact both on other academics and other scientists, as well as the public. So in terms of like future goals, it is going into a PhD program that really fits those criteria very, very well for me, and will allow me to, for example, make really high definition range maps and species occurrence polygons for a large number of species, so that other people can also use this research that I'm making and utilize it for their own studies. So kind of this whole we're all in the same boat, let's make science together. So that's really what I'm pushing for professionally, is doing more work like that.
Would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Oh, absolutely. I would have started much earlier.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Dillon. Really enjoyed chatting to you. It's been fascinating. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun.
Thank you. Where can people find you on social media?
Right. So you can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and Mammals, which is another social media app. But all of them are underneath the tag Dillon the Biologist. That's Dillon, the Biologist.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Dillon.
Thank you so much, and good luck.
Oh, thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.